Clear to engage. Time on target. 5 mics. Out.
Yeah. I just think she's going to be able to point to every Republican governor who's sending their National Guard to D.C. or wherever and say, like, is this what you want? This is what you're going to get with a Republican. And
well, you wrote yesterday about Oregon and Washington governors rejecting federal calls to scrap sanctuary laws. And so I think one of the dynamics that actually makes it difficult for Republicans is she's fighting with Trump. And that gives her some more credibility with her base. That's why, that is the primary reason that Gavin Newsom is going on the redistricting stuff. It makes him relevant for a potential presidential run, right? Yeah. And he's doing something that no other governor can do, which is we're literally going to basically take a pause on independent redistricting. And we're going to just do a heavy, even more partisan map than we already have, to offset what Texas is trying to do, right? And so then you have Kotek and the governor of Washington, Ferguson, saying that they got these letters from the Trump administration. They're like, well, it's been the first day. They're like, well, we're still looking at the letter. Meanwhile, furiously drafting like the angry reply that is coming. And they're like, no, we're not interested in changing our sanctuary laws. Thank you, and you can't hurt us. And then at the next week, look at all the money the federal government is taking from us and how much it hurts. So it's just an interesting dynamic. But she gets a lot of credibility with her base. And when there was a Democratic president, it was harder for her to get that same traction with her base. You saw in her first 2 years, she kind of struggled with that a little bit. And so Trump is really helping her out by continually poking at some of those like core liberal beliefs like sanctuary law.
Well, I would say, so is your intent that we are re-recording for the pod right now? Just so.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yes, don't say that, Dirk.
No, I was just going to say, though.
Before we started recording, he was going hardcore MAGA.
Wasn't he?
Or maybe hardcore leftist. We don't know. It's top secret.
No, I would say that looking at Kotek's response, like to that Bondi letter compared to Bob Ferguson in Washington, or like what Newsom's doing, which is truly like, I don't know, Democratic messaging that I haven't seen in a while. I mean, he is really going hard in sort of the Trump model, but like Kotek's was by far the most restrained. Bob Ferguson had a press conference with Democratic lawmakers. His letter was like extremely sort of, fierce rhetoric or very strongly worded. Kotek's was like, hey, we think that we comply with all federal laws. We're going to not change anything. And just so we think we're all good. So here's what we're doing. I mean, she has been, I think, more toned down than many, many Democrats around the country in this. And
that maybe she's doing that. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, it's okay.
You think that she's doing that because she doesn't want the response that Newsom's getting from Trump, and maybe Ferguson wants that response? Because I don't think she really wants to pick a fight with Trump, because I remember having a conversation with her during session. Vicky and I think we had dinner or drinks with her or something, and Amy at one point. And I asked her about, she was in the room. Remember when Trump went after that guy, the Vermont governor or whatever, like they went after that one, and she was in the room.
It was Maine, yeah.
Yeah, Maine's governor, and it was crazy. Hold on. Stupid phone. I'll have to cut this out of the audio.
Reagan, how old is your laptop? Because it seemed to take quite a while to boot up.
Well, part of the problem was I had my account logged out if I was just stayed logged in all the time. But the biggest problem is I have 8 gigs of RAM on my laptop. That's why it took forever to boot. I need to get a laptop with 16 or more gigs of RAM. But I was surviving on the 8 because it was just mine. And then I created a profile for my wife because she wanted to be able to do stuff on the computer as well. And that is the real problem, is when you have to switch between the profiles. So it's very slow. on 8
Sorry to hear
gigs.
it.
Phone never rings in the office until I'm podcasting. So.
If you wore a headset like me, it wouldn't even matter.
I was in the middle of telling a story. I could normally mute myself, but I was telling. So when we were talking with the governor during session, and she was referencing that, or I asked her if she was in that room when Trump went after the Maine governor, and she was like, "That was wild." Like she goes, "I was in the room," and she goes, "Am I having an out of body experience? It was a wild." And I remember telling that story, and it made me think when I was reading your article and seeing her response, I'm like, I don't know if she wants that fight. You know, that's my sense is I just don't think she really wants to have that PR fight. Like she's not on X. She doesn't run her X account. Her team does. I don't even think she's ever even been on X. She's not much of a social media person. If you really think about her, she doesn't really do a whole bunch on social. So I just don't think she wants that fight where Bob Ferguson's probably, to Reagan's point, running out there and saying, "Hey, have you guys heard of me? I'm the governor of Washington." I don't think people even know who he is nationally. And maybe he's trying to say, I want to get out and ahead of this, to the whole point that it's a great for the base to fight Trump. I mean, look at Rayfield. The guy sued him 23 times and counting, and he loves the headlines.
A couple of things. I wonder if she feels like she's not a pugilist on social media like that. I mean, she just hasn't been. Like, even when she is being relatively strong, it's pretty, in the context of politics these days, fairly measured. I think that maybe she feels like she doesn't have to go to those lengths to sort of appease her base. Like, she's, at the end of the day, she's telling Trump she's not going to change her sanctuary law. She's defending the things probably Democrats want her to defend, and not doing it in the way that is going to be as eye-catching to DC. At the same time, though, I don't know that that gets, I don't think that that necessarily gets her a pass from them, right? Like, we still have, conflicts going on outside the ICE center here in Portland, right? There's like constant little skirmishes happening out there. You got Tom Homan saying they're going to send folks into Portland and other cities. You got Pam Bondi suggesting they're going to send folks into sanctuary districts. I just don't think like this sort of keeping your head down is necessarily guaranteed to get that outcome. Now, maybe she doesn't want to have the pitched social media battle, right, with Trump online, because that's something that probably takes a lot of energy away from a lot of other things. But I don't think that like us being a little more polite in telling them we're not interested in what they're offering is going to necessarily ensure that Portland is not,
Maybe it gets you knocked down the list, though, to get targeted. Like, they get to you eventually, but not right away. They start with California, they start with Washington on the coast. I mean, that could be part of the calculation. I don't know. I mean, they looked at. Go ahead. They
went after Illinois, so I think there's a way more number of blue states for Trump to work through. And I think you're right. I think, Reagan, the calculation you're making is like, just kick us down the list a little bit,
Well, Ian, what does the negative attention from DC look like, right? Like, obviously, we're used to seeing the National Guard stuff at this point, troops. I mean, end of the day, like, there are clashes coming with this administration, at bare minimum in court, if they challenge the Oregon sanctuary law. And what does that look like as it trickles up through the court system? Is Oregon's sanctuary law in any peril over time because of this? Like, I don't think that the federal government there have been some challenges in the past. This latest one, if it comes, probably looks a little different, I think.
Well, and you also have what I thought was a super interesting and honestly a little bit smart strategy was there was a release, maybe it was Friday or earlier this week, possibly. Marion County was asked for some documents from federal law enforcement officials. And basically what they said is that while these are public documents, we are unsure if Oregon sanctuary law prohibits us from turning them over. Like, so if the ICE just came in, if somebody who worked at ICE just used their name, didn't say I worked for ICE, request the documents, like, they're just going to turn them over because that's the law.
Yeah.
for public records. But they're like, the action that it's ICE asking, that changes the calculation for us, and so they're not sure what to do. So they just filed a suit in federal court, and it's not a lawsuit like we oppose the sanctuary law. They just asked the federal judge basically like, tell us what to do. Do we follow the state sanctuary law? Do we follow the federal request for information? And I actually think that's really smart, because I think a lot of counties, red and blue alike, are all kind of in that middle spot where they're like, we're actually not sure what to do. And because you're not seeing necessarily really stiff work, like Kotek isn't out there, holding rallies saying we won't comply, with any piece of anything they want us to do. Right? She's not doing that, so that leaves everybody in the middle going, we don't know what to do. But Marion County taking the step of putting this into courts and asking a judge to rule on it is actually kind of a smart move, I think. And so I'll be really interested to see how that goes. And does the federal judge, what does the federal judge tell them? And then is there some sort of process where they go and appeal that if they think, if they don't get a good answer, or they get an answer that has, does the judge even answer them? I don't even know how that works. It was such a strange style of lawsuit. They're not opposed. They're just asking a judge to tell them which laws to follow. That's fascinating. And we got to watch that for sure.
Well, and the defendants, it's not like they're suing the state. They're suing like the state and the feds.
Yeah,
it's not like they're not seeking damages. It's just seeking clarity. It is a question that I don't think I've seen answered. Maybe lawyers that deal with this have. I mean, they're saying if you or me walked in and said, we want these documents, they would hand them over, no problem. Now, I haven't looked at I was talking to a colleague about this, and they were like, well, I think like birth certificates are wrapped up in this too. I'm not sure that you or I could ask for someone's birth certificate. Like, I don't think we could, frankly. But anyway, it is an interesting question. Let's just know a little hard to separate politics from just pure legalistic inquiry, because, the Marion is Bethel the Marion County chair? I should know. Or just a commissioner?
Yeah. Oh, I should ask. She was quoted in the release they did, though, so she probably is the chair.
Yeah. Well, anyway, running for governor against Kotek probably opposes her on this. Like, I will
okay,
assume.
But also an interesting point, though. You have a Republican candidate not saying, well, we should just comply with the federal law. She's actually taking the position of, well, let's get some clarity from a judge, which I think is also a surprise. It's not the thing you'd expect the Republican candidate to do. You'd expect the Republican candidate to, kind of beat their chest and be like, well, we've complied with ICE, and that's what we're doing. And if the federal government wants to, or if the state government wants to sue us, then, we'll see them in court. Like, that's what you would expect, right? Or that's what I would expect.
Well, in a campaign release, for sure. I mean, does her role as a county commissioner temper that somehow?
But those things aren't separate. Like, she is one person, and so when she makes a decision about what she's going to do on a county commission, she's also taking a position that gets publicly scrutinized in her governor's race, in the primary, by any opponents that she has, right? So, like, I get that she has roles and she's got to make decisions, but like, if you can't do this in the public life and then go on the campaign trail and say, I 100% support, going with ICE on everything. Because then somebody's going to point out and say, but when you had the chance to comply, you didn't. You asked a court. So, like, she's made a choice specifically about how she's approaching that issue. And I think that is super interesting to see how that plays out on the campaign trail, because I think it could be a calculation about what kind of state Oregon is. It also could be a calculation about what kind of opponent she thinks she's going to get. She may think, maybe if I don't get an opponent that's really hard, right, like a Duane Yunker doesn't run for governor, then maybe she never gets challenged on it. If she does get a challenge from a Duane Yunker style person, she probably will get hit on it. And that is the piece that I think is interesting. It does that hit from the right actually make her look more moderate and set her up for the general election? Like, I don't know what the calculation is. There's a lot of ways to look at it and approach it. I was just a little bit surprised. I would have expected Kevin Cameron's name in that release for that particular thing that was happening. So the fact that she stepped up and did it was, I was super interested.
Well,
if
you look at the case, though, I mean, they're referencing 4 illegals or 5 illegals that were, had everything.
Yes.
Robbery to kidnapping to rape and sexual abuse. Like, these are horrible human beings. I don't give a shit
Oh,
if they're an immigrant or not. They're clearly not good people. So, in my mind, I think it's almost the ICE thing. I think just kind of muddied the water because ICE actually came to their doorstep, right? And asked for more information, and they were concerned whether or not they could actually give more information. Like, would that put them? Like, would that make them breaking the law if they were to give information? And I guess that's really the question is what is public record and what is complying with federal officials versus what is not. And I think that's fair for her to ask that question. But I think
definitely.
the point is, I think what I would have done, I would have been way more on that. Like, these are bad people and they need to go away regardless.
Well, and they say kind of generally they support and public safety is a priority and all that, but because of the type of lawsuit, they're not taking a position on where they're at. They're not suing the state of Oregon for their sanctuary law, right? And so I think that nuisance is going to make it really interesting to see how it plays out, both from the legal perspective about how counties or other local governments follow the sanctuary law versus federal law, and then also if it plays into the campaign.
Yeah,
that's my thought.
I also though wonder if you're not ascribing too much sophistication to political communications. And
always.
Like you guys are in political communications. You know perfectly well that if you're Daniel Bethel's people, you'd be like, she challenged Tina Kotek's ruthless sanctuary laws, and like the debate about whether or not she did it hard enough or the nuances of whether she was actually challenging it or just asking a question would be completely lost. Right. So I think that she potentially wins on a couple of fronts if that's the game. And I haven't really figured it out that much.
No, I think there's definitely a way that it can be rolled positive too. I mean, I'm not saying that this approach is a bad one at all. I'm saying it's not what you'd necessarily expect from the average Republican. Now, that may mean it's above average good strategy. It may mean it doesn't work out. I don't even think that she could necessarily know that going in, but it's a thing that she's trying that is not typical. It's not basic. Okay. And so I think that it warrants like extra attention because of that. It's not just something you gloss over and go, oh, another Republican loves Donald Trump. Boom. Right? That's like,
okay. Well, immigration just as an issue is just fallen off the planet, right? So it's just not because now that there's like zero people coming over the border, the issue went from like number 1 to like number 8, went from 27% down to 3% that people give a crap about it. So it's really amazing how it's just cratered. I don't know.
Well, and I saw, in the kind of related stories to the one that you wrote about the response from Kotek and Ferguson, is this one about a guy, you guys did some expose about, OPB did an expose about this guy who's deporting himself to Mexico. And so there's like because OPB always loves the human aspect of this thing, and it's like, oh, look at this poor guy, he has to leave America, right? And so he doesn't get deported or doesn't have all that stuff, right? And then you have like kind of the other side of it, which is like a bunch of Republicans tweeting that story and going, good, this is what we voted for, right? And so it's always interesting to see those, especially in Oregon, interact, because you have especially in the middle, kind of the moderate Republicans who are kind of stuck in the middle on this, where they're like they believe in the legal system and they believe in complying with the laws, but they also have this kind of like, very human feeling about them, where they're like, well, we don't like how this feels and all that stuff. So it just always makes these kinds of issues really super interesting.
Called journalism. You have to find a story within the story, and that's why they put people there. They have to humanize it. Didn't you learn this in college, Dirk? They have to when you do journalism school, you have to find somebody to tell the story, because you can't just like write, this is what so and so says, this is what so and so says. That's not much of a story. The story is more like following the person, And I think there's there's good and bad with that. I think to your point, like there always is going to be, even you can follow the law on anything and you're going to find somebody that fell through the cracks. The same thing happens with, if you're the illegal immigrants that are getting deported, there's always going to be people that fall through the cracks. It is how we layer it. But I think overall with crime, sometimes you got to take a big bat to get rid of it, like they're doing in DC, right? I mean, they're just watching all those videos of just coming in, crunching tents, and just throwing them in the trash. I think it's great.
So, I mean, man, do you just look at the homepage of OPB and that's like our notes, Brian? I mean, we've got with less federal funding, Oregon ranchers are delaying wildfire projects. Budget crisis looming for rural Oregon counties. Portland taxes need a major overhaul. But we should start with.
Let's also note that I didn't write any of the stories that you just mentioned, so I probably won't be the most compelling speaker. On
listen. We just learned Dirk doesn't read OPB. That's just what we're learning.
I can read it all day. I'm not going to speak to it.
I can't get through all the please fund OPB pop-up banner ads, Dirk. I can't get through any. We've lost our federal funding.
Yeah. Maybe if you would click that donor button, they would go away, Brian.
Dirk is only state funded media now. He's not federal funded media. Let's start with Yunker though, because I think it was sort of a bit of a sideshow, I guess. I don't know. I listened and was disappointed Yunker didn't appear at the meeting. I did have to stop listening to a section of it, so maybe he came on later because I had to go run an errand. But I don't know that he ever appeared at the meeting. Which makes it way less fun. But maybe it was the Republicans asking him not to be there. Who knows? Honestly. But so you have, there was a complaint way back in session, and we talked about this. Yunker read a portion of a book that parents in one of the school districts in Southern Oregon was trying to get banned, and it was a particularly descriptive book. Another Republican, Kevin Mannix, who also was on this conduct committee, which I thought was added an extra layer of interest to this, objected to that being read on the floor. And then it wasn't overruled at first. And then Gomberg got his hearing aid working, and then it was overruled, after a quick caucus. And he wasn't allowed to move forward with it. And I think Yunker generally, like, he was doing it to make a political point, and he wasn't necessarily being belligerent about it. He always his press releases always sound more belligerent than he is in person. Often, I find, which is kind of interesting to me. I mean, sometimes he gets.
I would say that honestly, Yunker is almost the rare politician where the belligerence can match the press release. Typically, very belligerent press releases lead to people who are pretty like you're surprised how civil the discussion is. I mean, I heard him like curse out Christine Drazen on the floor of the House. Like, I think that he does. I think that he is pugnacious, and like, not to say that that's not good politics for him or whatever, but I think that I find him to be probably the most pugnacious member of the House right now.
Interesting.
Do you not? I mean, who else is more?
Oh no, he's
sort of in that mode.
Yeah, you're probably right about that.
By far the most outspoken. I remember we talked about that whole, because Dirk was right next. I think you were right next to him when he cussed out Christine on the House.
Yeah, I was listening to it. I mean, I've just never seen anything like it.
Which is crazy. So he doesn't, Yunker doesn't care whether you're in his party or not. Like, he's got an agenda and he just drives towards that agenda. And I think that, and there are some, I don't know whether that's good or bad. I don't know. Sometimes maybe I say it's fine. And sometimes I would say, I think the difference between somebody like him and say Ed Deal, who I think are both probably aligned politically, but Ed is way more, the way that he goes about talking on the House floor, it's way different. His style's way different than Yunker's, right? Whereas Yunker is going to be way more belligerent, and he's used the remonstrances to drive home very hard right political viewpoints.
But okay, so I just want to be fully like, I told you guys this ahead of time. I did not follow the conduct committee hearing. I'm familiar a little bit with the complaint, which was essentially one, saying those things on the floor of the House was a bridge too far. Like that was not an okay move. And then, if I'm right, correct me. Then when he got notice from the Leo that there was a complaint against him, there was going to be a hearing, he posted that publicly, and there was a sense that that had somehow aired out victims within the legislature who objected to his comments. Am I right?
Yeah, and I think also what was super interesting about that was one that the Abor Yang, who is the legislative equity officer that's in charge of the process, basically did come to the conclusion that his conduct violated Rule 27, that it did create a hostile work environment and all these things, right? And so what I think is interesting about that is, based on the way that the rule is written, you can give a speech on the floor, and read the contents of a book. And it wasn't, I mean, he was doing it in a political staged activity. Like his one thing I was not aware of that Ed Deal said in the committee, Representative Deal, was that whether he read it or not, Gomberg had a copy of what was going to be, because previously Yunker had used his remonstrances in a way that was grating to some members. And so he was required to get those run through the clerk's office first. So there was a copy of it that was available to people in leadership to read. And it was there. I don't know if they read it or not, but it was there. And so Junker's doing this as part of a staged political process. It wasn't like he stood up and nobody knew that this was going to happen. So there's that part of it that I think is interesting. And that still created a hostile work environment for two people. There was accusations that he retaliated, which weren't really founded, but that he did share that he was under investigation, and that the investigation was to staff people, but their identities were protected throughout the whole process. He never discovered who the staff people were that complained. You could make a guess that they're not Republican staff people, but I mean, that's about as far as you can get, right? So then so then you get to the part of where the Leo essentially gets to, well, yeah, he did rule, based on the plain reading of Rule 27, based on the complaints and the interviews, and then based on the content of the meeting, he violated Rule 27. So what that told me is that Rule 27 is not correctly written, because he did a thing that is fairly normal, I think, in the whole of the political process, which is point out hypocrisy. Point out, because his point was, I'm reading this book. This book is available to kids in the library in a public setting where children are listening. That was one of the whole points, is like, children are listening to this. This is not stuff that we want to hear in a public setting. He was overruled and not allowed to read the book. That was the whole point of the thing. And so now the committee didn't find that he violated Rule 27 or that he required any action. And now that was on a 2-2 vote. That was Dems versus ours. But you had sort of cross agreement about, yeah, actually, this wasn't a fun thing to experience. I think Mannix is sort of made that point. Cruft sort of making the point that, yeah, actually, most of the processes for the complaint we had worked and nobody's identity was exposed. So he actually agreed with the Republicans that there was no I don't know retaliation, which you also can't have retaliation. That's it. That was the one thing I was waiting for somebody to say, is none of these people work for Yunker unless his own staff complained, which I doubt very much. Those people are not employed by Duane Yunker. They're employed by another member, or they're employed by the legislative branch generally. Duane Yunker is not their boss. There can't be retaliation. Okay. And that's the part that I think is a little bit weird to me. Is it's like they're talking about retaliation like he has some sort of leverage over them. He can't fire them. He has no ability to make their life more difficult, except to be a difficult person, which is not against the law to be a difficult person. So I thought that whole point is like somebody forgot to check that point. I guess they're sort of making the conclusion that all the reps are sort of their employers, which is just wrong. It's not true.
The thing that confused me, and again, like I didn't watch it, but it feels like he did something that is built into the process. Like when they're talking about retaliation, like I think that any person that is subject to a complaint, and we've seen it in the past, that receive a letter from the Leo, it's their public record to share. Like it's your case. I think it's fair game to share that there has been a complaint filed against you, and like if there are concerns within the process that someone's identity might be revealed, and I think the legislature has made changes to Rule 27 to not make that be the case. Like then we need to change the process, but. Honestly, like as I looked at that, and I know that Rep. Tweetran felt very, very strongly that this was a problem. But I think if you're the subject of a complaint and you want to share that you've received that you're the subject of a complaint, that should be fine. I don't see why that was.
I think that was his biggest. Well, here's my points on it. Is he was complaining to and my boss is the co-chair on the Senate side. And he was sending emails to the co-chairs on both chambers for weeks, if not months, asking for a hearing, saying, I have been charged. I want a hearing. Mm-hmm. Where is my hearing? Where is and this is and so the failure of the process of all of Rule 27 is a complete sham. It's worthless. It's horrible. We spend $300,000 on an LEO who does nothing. Like it should be. Now I'll probably get charged with something because I work there. So, but he's right that it's a worthless process because he was asking for due process. And there was no due process in any of it. And I don't agree with how Yunker goes about his political rhetoric and getting up and during the, doing those remarks and stuff. I just think it's pointless. It doesn't help the debate. I think it's just, but I do believe his right to do it. I do believe that political speech should be more protected free speech than other areas. But I think the process is completely flawed. I think it fails every time it's been put in action. There's decorum rules that already should cover things. I mean, what's his face? Representative Hudson would sit there with his finger on the button, waiting to hit the impugn button, the privilege button, if Yunker said anything that was, out of key. So the idea that we have decorum rules, they're there. There's no reason for Rule 27. It was put in during the Me Too movement. That was when we had one really, really horrible senator that should have been thrown out anyways. And then it's just been used as a political weapon against people they don't like. So my 2 cents.
It always comes down to, I won't really take a stance on that. I think there's a reason to have some sort of process. And I think that creating a process that works is very, very difficult. And a lot of states have struggled with it. I will say that Rule 20, like conduct hearings, as you know, Bryan, because you went through one of these with they almost always come out in a deadlock. It just becomes a partisan thing, and you get a 2-2, and then nothing moves forward. And it's an extraordinary circumstance where a member of the party of the person who is like the subject of the complaint steps in and says that person needs to be castigated. So I don't know. I mean, that's just where we are. Yeah, I wouldn't argue it's a particularly useful process at this point, but I think it's very, very hard to create that process, especially given like the strange dynamics of the Capitol and the legislature.
Well, use your point to when Vicky went through the process with numbnuts, I forget his name, former representative. So what happened was he was found guilty of that. He was found, and that was beyond partisan lines. Then Speaker Kotek just removed him from committees, and basically they shove him in a corner. And they didn't get rid of him that way. You know how they got rid of him? They got rid of him. They redistricted him right out of his seat. Yeah. And so the political or the retaliation. I mean, you can almost say that he could probably have filed one against Kotek for talk about retaliation. He was retaliated against. He was redistricted out of his own seat. Like they basically said, yeah, you're out, Witt, bye. And then he tried to run for the Salem seat, and they just completely ousted him there in a primary. And it's just that whole process. Like, you have to realize that politics is messy. It's dirty. It's not easy. I mean, the three of us know this all too well, right? It's a very dirty, ugly process sometimes, and the mudslinging can just get intense, and we're always going to retreat to our corners. That's just what we do. And I think you can't have a committee of equal members and come to a consensus if it gets too dirty, because we're just going to side with our side. Unless it's a clear, but I would say the one time where we didn't use Rule 27 and we expelled a member, right? That was because it was clearly that he let people into the Capitol when he should have. He broke the rules of the House that went through both parties, and he lied about it. And he was thrown out because of that. And it didn't need Rule 27 to know that what you did went above and beyond reproach of a member. And I think you're talking about Mike Neerman, and I'm not even sure if that was considered retaliation or harassment, which is what Rule 27 mostly contemplates. And I guess maybe hostile work environment. I don't know. Anyway, pretty hostile when you let people with guns in the.
There's one piece of this too. There was actually some follow-up via letters that I never saw reported, but because this was sent to like a bunch of legislators, I'm just going to say it. So Drazen sent a letter after the conduct committee, and she writes to the conduct committee, I'm writing to express concern of statements made during the committee at an hour 31. Representative Tran encouraged others to file additional complaints related to the matter under the committee's consideration, saying it is inappropriate for a sitting member of the conduct committee to be involved in initiating or encouraging complaints that they later may be responsible for adjudicating. And then she goes on to say House Republicans believe this is why Rule 27 needs to be modified. And I thought that was interesting. That was not something I caught in the recording or paid attention to. But yeah, a conduct committee member saying, well, send us more complaints and then maybe we'll look at it again. It's first of all, it sort of violates the double jeopardy kind of style. Not that that's a requirement of Rule 27, but it is something that is sort of generally a part of our system where it's like once you've had the trial and stuff, we're not going to try you again for it and just try to get you. Maybe we get different members on conduct, and so that changes the way it goes, right? So,
and just one little note: there are a bunch of alternates on the conduct committee too. So
yes,
probably
I don't know how they get picked either.
I don't know how, and presumably she would have to recuse or something along those lines. But I don't know. We can't fully assume.
You know how they get picked. I'll tell you how you get picked. The speaker or the president call you and they say, would you be willing to serve on conduct? Oh God, do I have to? And then I go through the list of people who finally say yes.
Because conduct is picked by the whole body, technically. It's not appointed. They have to come up with names to put forward. Both caucuses do that. I mean how they pick for that meeting. Because you just know everybody gets the default members they all get, and they're like,
well, the co-chairs.
Well, I'm pretty sick today, so no, I can't appear at the conduct hearing for Yunker. And so then one of the alternates, some dumb alternate goes, yes, they check their calendar. Yes, I'm available. Like, schedule something.
Yeah, it's
right. Okay, so
hard pivot.
We got to talk about the fake one-day special session that is definitely not going to be one day. And this is one thing I still don't know, Brian. Do you know, does the governor even sent the official proclamation declaring this session yet? Or like, what is happening? Because she says, I'm going to call a special session on Friday, the 29th of August. I haven't seen crap on that.
I'm with you. I haven't seen an actual proclamation that has come down. I know that she's drafting another bill because the first bill that was drafted apparently hit the concrete. People didn't necessarily like what was in it. So I'm hearing every rumor that you can think of. I feel like I've heard over the last couple of days with special session from she's pulling it and we're not even going to special session because it could be because they don't even have the Democrat votes. They may not even have enough for quorum on the Senate side because there may not be enough Dems. They may have the votes, but maybe they don't have 18 to actually show up. that are Democrats.
Mark Meeks leading a walkout in the Senate. Crazy days.
It's wild. The rumors that I'm hearing. I've heard that Susan McClain's been calling Republicans asking for votes, calling through the list that she's been dialing through. I've heard. But to your point, Reagan, we're hearing like they put together the joint committee. They've kind of, and they do that. All the leaders on it, which tells you that they're not taking any chances. Like, I mean, you got Tana Sanchez on there. You got, former House, Vicky's on there. Like they put all of the people, right? I mean, you got Ben Bowman, you got, the speaker. Like we are not taking chances. We are putting
that the entire committee is like, I think people you all take seriously. I think that is what it was. There is not a, well, I guess we have to put this person on some committee somewhere. This was all like heavy hitters who are serious, who know what they're doing. Like it's going to be, this is real now. We've hit real time. But again, and the logistics of it is the thing that I'm questioning. So one of the things that originally was heard and shared was, Senator Przanski and Senator Solomon, I think, both put in their newsletters that the House has to start the bill, which I believe is true because it's a revenue-raising measure, so it has to start in the House. The House is going to meet on Friday, and then the Senate is going to meet on Monday, which is Labor Day. And I was like, what the heck? That is the weirdest logistics for the session I've ever heard. But one of the things, and then they were talking about having public hearings on the bill before the session actually starts, which I'm like, logistically, I guess you still schedule it for a public hearing. You just don't take any testimony, or you only take invited testimony or something in the actual session, which is weird to me, but okay. And then I heard that the House is going to meet on the Senate chamber. So the Senate chamber will be forever desecrated and destroyed and ruined. Peter Courtney, there's just no way that ever would have happened if Peter Courtney was still alive.
They share
and frankly, the House should be furious they have to meet on the Senate floor. I don't even understand that. Either they should close both floors and meet at the convention center, or we meet on both floors. But like, what is this garbage about meeting on this? There isn't even enough seats. You're gonna have them sit next to each other on the desks. I don't even know what we're doing. And we're supposed to open the building at the end of September when we have legislative days anyway. But again, the logistics of this is just so weird to me, and it seems like they don't even have it nailed down, or they do and they won't tell anybody. I have no idea what's going on with that. Do you have any information, Dirk? I'm sure you have more information.
I feel like you guys are you this uninformed? So, okay. So
this uninformed.
Yeah, we are. Sometimes we are.
No, I don't know. So, okay. So the governor's dropping her second LC today.
Yeah.
It's got some things designed to encourage enviro votes, and
oh, good. That'll help.
It's got some things designed to help the truckers to get them off the back. So something that maybe wins Republican support. Still haven't seen I've seen a revenue analysis for the first bill. That shows it's about half as big as HB 2025 was that failed the last day of session in terms of purely revenue raising over the decade. Yes. So I'm very interested in what you guys think, because your leaders right now in each chamber are posturing very much they won't waive rules. That's good. So that screws over your weekend, Reagan, in the House, maybe, because that means they have to read it every 3 day or once every day for 3 days. So are you meeting Friday, then Saturday, then Sunday? Are you meeting Friday, Saturday, then Monday on your Labor Day, and then they kick it over to the Senate right away? But Crazen's saying
same chamber. That's a regular.
Well, okay, good point. So yeah, maybe it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday if this holds, and then Bonham's saying his members don't want to waive the rules either, because essentially they want to maximize visibility of this thing. They don't want Kotek to hide this in a Labor Day weekend when everyone's cooking hot dogs over a fire. They want to make sure the media is covering it more, and that maybe the vote happens in the week when people are sort of back to work and back to life. I don't know, man. Like, there's so much posturing in that building. Maybe Bonham knows that some of his members are going to cut away and waive rules. Maybe Drazen knows the same. Who knows? I mean, I would be interested in you all are in the chambers and work for members. Like, do you think procedural rules get waived for this? That's often what we see in a special session, right? Like, more often than not, at least lately, these things are like one day. It's all the the wheels are greased going in.
I haven't heard Republicans, I think, that would want to waive the rules. I don't think there's a desire to. I think there's that I'm talking to. I mean, I talked to a decent number of them, and I know ones that are going and they don't feel any reason to waive the rules. Like there's one thing to provide quorum. It's another thing to roll over and let them just stomp you, while you're providing quorum. So those are very two different distinct political natures. And then it's a whole nother thing to vote yes for a gas tax, right? So for a tax increase. So you're talking like three very distinct things. One is quorum or not quorum. Well, governor calls a special session, I think you got to show up, right? So I think that's just the reality of it.
Because she can call another one. I think that's the biggest piece that people don't even think about. It's like, well, just deny the quorum. And I'm like, well, she's just going to call the next one and the next one and the next one. Like
Texas.
This is what Abbott is doing in Texas. They ended the first special session. Oh, no maps. He calls the second special session. Shockingly.
Every day. Yeah, right. So I think there's that. So that doesn't make any sense. But also there should be, I don't think there's any, I haven't heard any Republicans that are like, oh, well, I'm just going to waive the rules and let's just get in and get out of there. I think Kotek is probably her thought process of Labor Day is thinking that everybody would just want to get in there and get out of there, right? And she went through a lot of special sessions, especially through COVID, right? I mean, Governor Bryan, what do we have, like 6 in that year of 2020 or something?
Maybe 3.
4.
Four?
I think it was,
I think it was
4.
more
Hold on,
three.
I'm pulling it up on all this right now.
There's a whole list.
Dirk, there was like when the
First, second, third special session.
Dirk was right.
4, probably 4. I
Dirk
bet.
was right.
I don't know. A lot. 3, okay. 6 sounded better.
Short. You'll probably confuse short with the special session, maybe.
Still 3 is a lot, right? So, but we went in and we got out of there in a day, right? You do your votes and you just leave, and everybody, because usually we were dealing with something that isn't as controversial as a tax increase.
Right.
Well, I think that's really the other side of it, and I think the questions, and then the other thing is like, do they have 36 votes on the House and do they have 18 votes on the Senate? Like that's a whole nother layer. And then I just don't know at this point. We'll see what they put out today because I know like the left side of the Democrat House caucus didn't like 2025. That was a big problem with it, is they didn't like it because they didn't think it went far enough. Right. So the left.
Yeah, but you had like Gamba, I think, was willing to vote for it. I mean, and he's about as left as it gets. So I don't know. I mean, the problem here, part of the problem with the calculus and trying to game this out is we never saw a floor vote on in either chamber on 2025. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of posturing going on, but we never got to actually have people throw their cards down. So like Mannix, for instance, was signaling he was willing to vote for it in the House, right?
I think it was the House. I think Meek was the problem, and
right, yes, and Meek is now being appeased potentially. I don't know what Meek is doing, but potentially
he called for Wagner to resign. I mean,
which we have to talk about.
But he is being appeased in part by this piece of this bill that will cut language out that deals with tolling. So, and I think he said in the media that has assuaged his concerns. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, yeah, we don't
change politically how I would go after Meek. I would just say that he's all for raising your taxes to the point that when there is a tolling measure comes across, Mark Meek will vote for it.
Okay, fair. But just in terms of this bill, if he's on board, and there were rumors Weber was willing to play ball, and Todd Nash has said if the Dems put something common sense before him, he's not fundamentally opposed to a transportation bill. I mean, I think it makes sense to me that the Dems can get this through. I just, if I had to bet, I would bet it goes. But again, we just haven't seen where people's cards are on the first one.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, we haven't seen a floor vote, so we don't really know where people voted. And I think that's the wild part about this session special session compared to other ones before. Usually there were very distinct issues that you're trying to deal with. And I don't know if they were not necessarily bipartisan, but they were more, you could see, okay, hey, we got to deal with this, right? So you would deal with it and you would move forward with it. And this one where it's very partisan, and it's nobody really wants, I don't even think a lot of Dems want to vote yes for raising people's taxes. I don't think, they're not excited to do it. I think some of the Dems are upset that it's not actually it's just stopping a gap. I mean, I know that's my biggest hang up, and I know it's my boss's biggest hang up, is like he was willing to go in and figure out, a long-term solution to our funding issue for ODOT and roads in Oregon, right? But there's no fundamental change to the agency, so why vote yes for something that is just they lose $1 billion, what's another billion? They don't care. So if you're not fixing the problem, you're just plugging more money into the same system. And I just don't see fundamentally why we would vote yes for any of that stuff. Just to save 400 jobs?
Well, I mean, I think that the people that are pushing this would say those 400 jobs. I probably on this podcast, this is not a sentiment you guys agree with, but losing those 400 jobs, those 12 maintenance facilities, and the shortfalls that are happening on county and city levels, are going to create real hardships and difficulties and worsening road. Now, I haven't taken a full survey of every road in the state and surveyed all the fiscal conditions of every county road department. I don't know, but that, there is real concern that the bloodletting in ODOT would be felt by Oregonians.
Well, I also think you see there was a story, I don't know if it was over the weekend, but one of the guys with No More Freeways who has an economic consulting survey probably. Business. Yeah, Joe Corey was basically saying, well, the ODOT's project budgets are too bloated. And I was like, well, yeah. And I think, but he's, representing No More Freeways. He obviously has a particular viewpoint about why. And he's like, well, if you just don't build any more freeways, you save so much money. And it's like, yeah, but their job is to build roads. So anyway, they have a huge, interesting, Democrats are out there being just well, how do you fix roads? Well, you just eliminate. Well, how do you fix immigration? Eliminate ICE. And apparently they feel the same about fixing roads. You just eliminate ODOT. You just get rid of them. You don't need more roads. So anyway, I think that sort of the strategy is just about what to cut. And so the thing that gets you to quickest budget parity is obviously headcount. It's what large corporations do when they need to. But it's not a strategic long-term plan that actually gets you to where you need to be in your budget. It's not a strategic reduction. It's just a strategic headcount reduction, right? So if you were actually going to plan to make ODA, and that's what they never do, is they never plan to make these agencies smaller. They don't make significant plans to streamline in ways that are significant beyond sort of the basics. And so they haven't looked at what does it mean to have an ODOT that exists in a scenario that doesn't include increased revenue. They've always been planning on increased revenue. They've been you see the Transportation Commission talking, especially the chair talking about we should just toll everything. Right? Julie Brown is out there saying tolls are the answer for a lot of these big projects and stuff like that because it's a gigantic new funding stream. Now, it has massive political problems, which is why while she's out there saying toll everything, Tina Kotek is out there being like toll nothing, at least not while I'm running for governor. And so you have sort of this disagreement about the politics of it, but ultimately, and I do remember there's a senator who's
also
not
said, again, to that point, just I'll let you keep going, but ODOT commissioner said she doesn't need legislative approval or disapproval to toll. She can toll when she wants to.
Which I think she may have that capacity. I don't know. Now she'd obviously have Tina Kotek on her phone. She'd be getting some calls and some texts. But you also have. I remember several lawmakers that I spoke with. A lot of this was early in my legislative career, and some of them aren't there anymore. They were not born in Oregon. And these particular lawmakers said, I don't understand why everybody hates tolls. Tolls are everywhere else, right? And same thing, I think that they think about a sales tax, right? It's just normal life for everybody else. But here it's still a massive inflection point. And so they're not designing their agencies to live with less. They are only looking at what cuts do they have to make to get you back to balance, because you have to be balanced, and that's it. They're not making, and this is the difference between like what Republican governors and states do versus what Democrats are. Republicans are actually making plans to make their agencies smaller. Florida came out and was like, we have the smallest government we've ever had. We've spent less on, like, that's their goal. Their goal is small government, and Democrats don't do that. And so when they reduce headcount, it's always going to be more painful. It's always going to be less strategized, because they don't spend time thinking about how to make it smaller. They're not willing to accept a scenario where there isn't more revenue coming from somewhere. It's just always about the amount. And so that, I think, is part of it. So it's not a strategic cuts. It's not strategic cuts at all. It's not planned cuts. It's not developing a smaller ODOT. You also have the problem that they have, which is in the parties, even though they have the far left willing to vote for a less of an increase in spending on roads and not getting what they want in terms of transportation, they still have a big disagreement within their party. And I think they're kind of split close to the middle on this in terms of doing more on transit, doing less on cars and stuff like that. And that caters to a very small base of people that have that thought. These like carless cities and all this, transit stuff that they want to do is really catering to a very, very small group of people. And so like you have these, the politics of that makes it very difficult, because they're trying to deal with the 95% of people who drive. And Democrats are trying to make that policy, and they're continually being stymied at a combination of people who are too moderate and too liberal on the issue, that they can't get to what most normal people would think, which is like pave the roads. I don't know what my point is there, but I said a lot of stuff.
You did, yeah. You really did, yeah.
To the session, like,
yeah. Prediction. What's your prediction, Dirk?
Well, I'm hearing from you all that you're seeing at least a 5-day session. You think the rules go. I mean,
yeah.
Okay.
I know my wife, we have to take our son to college next week, back to college. He's moving into a different dorm. She's got so she's going to fly back because she's on this joint committee. So she's going to fly down Monday after the joint committee. She's figuring out how to fly. She's like, do I fly back Friday morning? If we're not waiving rules, can I fly back Saturday, and not be there Friday? So I think there's a lot of people trying to figure out, and I just don't think anybody's laid out that, like, this is what houses. But she's planning on it being a 5-day scenario, right? Where you're just going to be there all weekend. And, I said, well, if you fly back Friday and because obviously they would have to go to committee again. And then there's also this idea, if they joint committee meet and pass anything before they actually gavel in a special session?
Yeah. So that's the other thing I was going to mention. They have a committee scheduled next Monday.
Yeah.
They're doing an interim joint committee as the public hearing, so that they are taking the testimony. They're leaving testimony open for the 48 hours or whatever. Like, they're doing it as an interim. Now, I don't know if there's any sort of like process issues around that, but this is so the plan is do it on Monday, have the fight, whatever it is, come in for the special and do a work session, right? First read, work session, kick it into the House chamber for the second read and third read whenever those happen, and then over to the Senate.
That's the theory, but then a joint committee makes sense because nobody can minority report, right? So that makes sense. So that
and you don't have to do a second round of public.
Yep, you don't have to do all the public stuff. But I don't know. Dexter's
in terms of
I think on the LC, the chair of Legislative Council. He's been all over the place because I think everybody's asking these same questions. Like, can you really do that without gaveling in? If the Senate doesn't gavel in till Monday, can they do a joint work session without them gaveling in first on Friday? Like,
I'm also not sure there is I was looking into this a little bit during the session when I did a story on placeholder bills, but there might not be any actual statutory or constitutional requirement that a a public hearing is held.
There isn't one.
Right. So they are doing it as a matter of course, and because that's sort of the practice and policy, but not because they have to. And so maybe that is how they are able to do it in the interim and not during the special.
Yeah, but Brian's point is if the Senate hasn't convened, can senators be there for committee, right? Because normally to start a session, you have to meet, you have to show up, everybody's there, everybody gets sworn in. Now we're in session, right? If the Senate doesn't even show up and have a floor session before the session, I think you definitely have an issue with making the argument that the Senate has actually convened, unless the convening is controlled by the governor calling the session, right? But I would say you have...
They're not convened. So
right.
Vote yes on a work session bill on Friday when the Senate hasn't convened. I don't know if you have the people.
That's interesting.
And that's
so now we have to do opening ceremonies and the whole thing.
And then they're telling Republicans, legislative council, that we can't draft bills. We can't get our own transportation package bill drafted because we're not in session. So you don't get it both ways. And I think they're trying to get it both ways. And I think that's really the problem and when I mean they, I mean the presiding officers are trying to figure out how to work this thing for the governor. And I think there's just a lot of logistical stuff that they haven't tried to figure out. Instead of just doing what they should do is they should just do the stupid e-board, put some money towards it, and wait till a short session and figure it out then. But I think it's just that would just solve the problem, right? I mean, I don't know why they just don't do that. I think that if you were to ask me, I think maybe they end up just doing that because we could, if you think about it, why wouldn't we sue on the context of that they violated the state constitution by passing laws that are not constitutionally viable. You broke state law. You cannot vote on a measure when you're not in session and you haven't convened session. So you don't get to vote. Like it doesn't work that way.
I would be fascinated to see an LC opinion on that. If you guys come across one on your angle, because that's not a question I've ever even thought about. Maybe it just doesn't happen.
Reagan, I guess we'll have to put in a request to LC because the more that I've been thinking about it, the more that I'm just sitting there going, I don't know legally how they're able to do this without it. Because we've been through enough special sessions where you show up, you gavel in, you do a little committee, you come back, beep, beep, boom, people vote, everybody goes home, right? I mean, there's a process and there's a reason for the process.
Yeah, my assumption is normally like our leadership offices would have already sent that request and worked on that. So maybe they're doing that now. I don't know, but maybe I'll send one of my own just to see the opinion. What else do we need to talk about? Senator Meek calling for Wagner to resign.
That's wrinkle and everything.
Yeah, just fun. I think this is more. I classify this as interesting because the Democrats doing it, right? Republicans did a lot of things in 2023. When Wagner was selected as the Democratic nominee, there was a press release that went out. I don't think anybody read it, but it did say that Wagner was
the one you wrote.
Yeah, I did write that. I think that said Wagner was not trustworthy and unqualified to run the Senate. Basically, I think the first time the motion to vacate the chair ever happened was in the 2023 session. You should go back and watch the video where that happened. I'll have to pull the date. But
I think Drazen did it during redistricting to Kotek.
Oh, really?
Or maybe it wasn't to vacate, but maybe it was to censure. I don't know. There was something that happened, but anyway.
But yeah, so the motion to vacate and remove the Senate president, which is entertaining video because he's in the seat at that point and he goes, we're in recess. While he figures out what the logistics of that are. He wasn't obviously ready for it. I don't think we had told him that was
I remember
coming.
we met that morning to talk about this is what we're going to do. And we're like, yes, this is great.
So there was a lot of different inflection points with that. And ultimately, Wagner remained the president. But there was always still this sort of like discussion about, and it was mostly from the Republican side about, well, Wagner isn't meeting Republicans where Courtney used to meet Republicans, which I think was true. I think if you talk to any Democrat, you would say that Wagner, while publicly posturing to be as just, as great as Peter Courtney is, and I'm going to go visit all the Republicans and my door is always open. I think privately they would tell you that the reason he ran for Senate president and how he won Senate president was telling them, I'm not going to do what Peter did to you, which was kill your bills to make Republicans happy. So Wagner, so now you see sort of the internal battle that has existed, I believe, in the Democrat caucus since the Republicans started reading bills at the beginning of 2023. I think this is actually much more longstanding. I don't think Mark Meek wakes up and goes, actually, Wagner hasn't been a very good Senate president, and then writes a letter to his caucus. I think what you've seen here is in this letter a declaration in public now, spill out of a battle that's been happening that they've pretty effectively kept pretty quiet for the most time. They've been trying to keep this an internal battle, and things keep not going the way at least some of the caucus members represented by Meek's opinion think it should go. And so now you have you have Meek publicly calling for Wagner to resign. Wagner has no response, which I think is, somewhat typical for this. Why would you respond to that? Meek doesn't have any extra authority to remove him. There's no ability, even if he votes with the Republicans to vacate the chair, they don't have enough votes, right? And I saw it's not like him doing that suddenly imperils Wagner any more than he's already imperiled. But the fact that it's now that he wrote a letter that he knew could become public, I think, partly because it would become a public record if you email it or write it and send it out, right? It's a public record once it's received by everybody else. As long as you just, if you keep it in drafts, it's not a public record technically, because probably nobody knows it exists and knows to ask for it. But now it exists and people know how to get it. So making this fight public, I think, is the part that's interesting. The fact that there's a rift inside of the Democratic caucus somewhere. Now, maybe it's just Mark Meek versus the other 17. I sort of suspect it's not. I have a lot of reason to believe it's a much more ugly battle than just Meek himself. I think that.
And what are your reasons? What are your reasons, Reagan?
Okay.
I mean, I'm not going against you. I'm just.
No. I think you're asking me to back it up. I'm trying to think of ways to effectively show that are more sort of public, that would be verifiable than just based on rumor. So let me think about that for a little bit while you guys talk about it.
I mean, the question is, so the subtext here obviously is Meek didn't want the transportation bill. He got pulled from the committee. That really angered him. He walked out on the last day, I think. I think that it is pretty clear. It is never not the case, right, that there is a segment of a caucus that is displeased with the leader and a segment that is probably okay with the leadership. Like, is that especially pronounced within the Senate Democratic caucus right now, or the House? I mean, you hear a lot of belly aching in the House too. So I think there's, without question, people that probably are looking at Wagner's leadership and saying there are some things we don't like here. But Meek wrote this on his own, right? Like, there was no one else signing on to this thing. And I think that tells you something. Like even if people agree with him, are enough people willing to stick their necks out and call for this resignation? Like, we just haven't seen that. I mean, it is not a particularly smart political move to do this. You risk a lot of backlash if the presiding officer in either chamber decides that they are really unhappy with this move. Like, he controls your committee assignments. He controls whether your bills live and die. He controls whether you are an influential member of the legislature or not. I mean, think about Neerman or the dude in the House who just got taken off all committees and was functionally Bryan Stout was functionally a non-member of the House for his entire term. Like, yeah. So anyway, I don't know. I mean, I would say I am dubious that this is the end of Rob Wagner.
No, I agree. I'm not saying that this. I actually don't think that this means that he's going to lose his job at all. I just think it's notable that it is appearing publicly now.
Yeah, and I will also say, like, I'm not in the Democratic caucus groups or whatever their signal group chats are where they're actually being honest with one another, So I that's one of the reasons why I asked you, like, what is where has this crossed your path where you're hearing like a lot of grumbling? Obviously, there has been some very interesting leadership struggles within that caucus very recently. Kathleen Taylor was the caucus leader, and then all of a sudden she wasn't, for not much reason that was publicly made clear. There are some really interesting dynamics there.
I think that Democratic Senate caucus is fairly, I don't want to say they're divided, but probably not more so than, Republican caucuses, I would imagine, to your point, that there's always a few people that don't like the leadership, regardless of minority, majority, right? There's always people that don't like it. You can't appease everybody. However, I think in your references, there most of the times you can take a Brian Stout and go throw him in the corner because he's in the minority. Mark Meek is the 18th vote. He wields way more power. You can't quiet him.
And a swing district senator, which has its own,
in a swing district where he's up for election. So what is Wagner going to do? You're going to, unless you primary him, you're going to support him. So what do you do there? I think it's a very difficult. Mark Meek, I think Mark is smart enough. He's been at this game a long time. So he's smart enough to know what he's calculating what he's doing and realizing that this is a retaliation, I'm sure, for being thrown off of the committee. And he's pissed at Wagner, which he should be, right? I would be pissed too. Like, what person wouldn't be pissed that you put all that work into transportation? He's the chair of revenue. The guy has been intimately involved in this process. And at the last minute, because he didn't like your final bill, you're thrown off the committee. And then he says his remarks on remember that dais, and Wagner was sitting to his left, and he spoke next and didn't even address what Mark said in that committee. Didn't even just say, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I got to move this forward and you're not helping me with the cause. Or publicly has said nothing. Nothing, which I think is a failure of leadership to not be able to publicly come out. I hope that you guys in the media ask Wagner when he does anything publicly, what is your response to Mark Meek?
Well, but okay.
They don't hold him accountable. And that's always, I've had the problem. You guys will write that story, but where is the hammering him on, what's your response? Well, I texted Wagner yesterday. I said, I think
if we asked him, he would take the high ground and not want to engage. That in talking to his office and him, that's my sense. I also this is maybe a cynicism bred of being in the Capitol too long. Who was surprised at that? We saw Courtney, and at least 2 occasions when I was there, I don't think he kicked Betsy Johnson off any committees, but he made himself an extra member of committees.
He did remove her at one point to move the cap and trade bill, I think. And stuff.
Or at one point, he added himself to the committee, so there was the something like that.
He's an ex officio member of all committees. That's a power the Senate president has that the Speaker does not. Is all joint committees and all joint subcommittees and all Senate committees, he's a member of them, and he appears, and he doesn't change the number of people in committee needed to pass a bill. So if you need an extra vote to move something, boom, he can show up and do that at any time.
So I don't know. I understand why Meek's mad, but at the same time, the Democrats have super majorities. I guess ultimately they kind of did let one senator kill this thing, but in the committee process, there's a very little chance of that happening if there's enough momentum behind a bill. And
one part of the letter that wasn't publicly reported was, actually 2 pieces. One is, so he actually has this laid out in 4 sections of his 4 arguments against 2023 session mismanagement, which I think was pretty well covered. 2025 transportation package debacle, lack of engagement, all that stuff. There's 2 other pieces here that don't get reported on, mostly because I don't think the general public cares. 1, inability to handle internal adversity. President Wagner failed to support our duly elected Senate Majority Leader, Senator Taylor, against internal and external attacks. So that is significant because what he is alleging basically is that Wagner either didn't say anything or didn't vote for Taylor to remain the Majority Leader. I think that is incredibly significant, but only significant in the internal, kind of political scheme. Again, if you're a general member of the public, you don't really care. Senator Taylor, against internal and external attacks. By allowing division to fester, he undermined fellow caucus members and our collective strength. We, as Democrats in the majority, we must stand united, but this lacks backbone, and strategic blunders have only deepened our fractures and divisions. President Wagner is ultimately responsible. 2024, caucus retreat failures is the other thing that didn't really get covered. Again, who cares? Caucus retreat. It's some of the worst meetings ever devised by anyone. I don't know who invented caucus retreat. That person should be forever shamed for doing sort of a thing. It's just like team building exercises. It's like, stop it. Instead of building cohesion, the retreat dragged into unproductive debates over leadership roles. The retreat fell short of its goals to bring us together. The resulting majority leader compromise, I'm assuming he's referring to JAMA, left us ill-prepared, directly contributing to the setbacks we have faced since. Because usually the caucus retreat happens after the election, after you know who your membership's going to be, right? So they add Broadman. They also had a vote for a majority leader. That change happened after that. Typically, a majority leader who picks up seats does not lose their position unless they step down themselves. And then that's preparing them for 2025. And then you saw Democrats, I think generally, I mean, they got a few of their key priorities, but besides passing the budget, there isn't a ton on the list of big like policy goals that they were able to move in 2025. And he's basically laying all of that at Wagner's feet and saying, because our caucus retreat went poorly, the session went poorly. I don't know if a good caucus retreat would have resulted in a better session for them. But that's what Meek is alleging. And I thought it was, I mean, I understand why these two pieces of the letter weren't reported. You know, he didn't accidentally CC me. I was able to acquire it. But, you know, he should have CC'd the whole building because this is hilarious.
Well, he sent it to every I mean, look, you send a letter to 17 other lawmakers. Like, yeah, you know, that letter.
They all have two staff, and it becomes it is a public record. So who even cares how you get it? At the end of the day, it's like, it is a public record. So if I go and ask for it, eventually I'm going to get it at some point, right? As soon as you know it exists. And everybody has, you know, there's multiple staff people that are looking at that too. So it's going to become public very quickly anyway.
Well, we're probably going to let Dirk get out of here.
I have to do actual work. This is fun though. I mean, there's so many, like, and you're right. No one cares. Like, to us in the Capitol, it's this endlessly fascinating sort of personal dynamics. There's like Taylor wanted to be president. She was like really upset when Wagner got it. There's just all sorts of long history among these people, but
it makes it fun. But that's who we cater to on our podcast. If you really want the crosstabs, you want to dig deep, about what happens in the Capitol. That's where I think Reagan and I have fun with that. And we appreciate you coming on and being part of this, and having your perspective is different than our perspective because it's fun to have you on. And I do really appreciate, your perspective on things because it does help me shape my perspective a little bit. And I hope other people get to see a different angle. Reagan and I, of course, I think all three of us are jaded at this point about the building. However, this stuff is fun, right? I mean, the Meek stuff, the special session stuff, there's just something, how does it all work? How's it all going to play out? I think it's kind of neat. I find it entertaining, to say the least. So
no, I like coming on. It's fun to chat about this with y'all, even when you're bashing my employer or whatever.
I just wish I'm not bashing them. I'm just highlighting the fact that they're state sponsored. I don't see the concern there, Dirk.
You guys do a good job with journalism. I don't like some of the headlines and some of the editorials.
Yeah, fire your editors. They're not very good, but the rest of it's not bad.
Nigel and you are probably my two favorite reporters. I think you guys at least do your due diligence, and I think that's important to do. And I think capturing all sides of an issue is important, and digging deeper, because there's always stories that are deeper, and it's hard to go deeper. I think a lot of reporters that I read, they just kind of hit the surface, and I think you have to go deeper. And anyways.
Here's the question. Is anyone going to know who you're talking to for the last hour and a half? Because we just started this podcast without any preamble.
We'll put it in the headline. We'll say state-sponsored reporter Dirk VanderHart. Just kidding.
My taxpayers pay your salary. No, I'm just kidding, Dirk.
They only got like 300.
I've been told it doesn't. I've been told it's for other stuff. I have no way to verify that. Release the records, Dirk.
Right? Isn't it?
You were texting me incessantly about this during a certain point in session, if I recall.
Well, because there was anyway. I'm not going to get into it. Listen, the sausage making process. Here's the thing about real sausage: is like the sausage making process is ugly, but at least the sausage tastes good. Here in this process, the sausage doesn't taste good. That's the biggest problem. Is the bills just need to be better at the end of it if it's an ugly process to get there. But right now, the sausage making is ugly and the sausage tastes terrible. So, somebody's got to fix that. We'll see.
All right. Well, Dirk, we may, depending on what happens with special session, if it's wild, crazy, we'll have to have you back on and rehash what happened in session. If it turns out to be this boring 5-day, then we'll probably just touch on it and move on. But hopefully something fun happens, and I'm sure we'll see you in the Capitol. I get dragged there because for both chambers, so it kind of sucks for me.
You're both currently on staff, right? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll see you.
Awesome.
All right.
See ya.
Thanks, y'all.